All right, good morning once again to everyone. So, today we're going to start off with last week's homework and then we're going to get into chapter 8.2. So, anyone that actually did the homework can answer the question. Um, so, the first question is give an example of a paper database. So, what is an example of a paper database? Shermany has an address book, an encyclopedia, a telephone directory. Those are all correct. Anyone has anything else different?
A dictionary.
Very good. Can anyone remember the definition for a database off their head? No one? Anyone wants to give it a try? Or you can check back your notes. What's the definition of a database? What is a database?
The database is an organized collection of stored data.
Very good. An organized collection of stored data. So, if you think about it, um, the examples that are mentioned so far an address book, an encyclopedia, a telephone directory, a dictionary they're all a collection of data. They're all storing data and they're all going to be organized. They're all going to be organized in some way. And more than likely, it's going to be alphabetically in that order. Right, so those are some examples there. So if you guys don't have those examples, you can take it down. Um, Question number two. Give two examples of large databases that might be used to help members of the public. So it's a large database and it's helping the public. Wikipedia, yeah, it's giving information. hmm Yeah, Wikipedia is going to be correct. It's it's an online tool that you can use to get information from. Anyone else?
Is there an online store?
Online store, online library, very good. So online store, that's going to be a large database. So how is that helping the public? It's going to offer that service online so that persons don't have to go to this store physically. They can see the items online. And an online library, persons don't have to go physically to the library to read books or to get information anymore. They could go online. So the example of Wikipedia, would would you guys consider that an online library?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it can be considered an online library because it's like if each topic that is on Wikipedia, you can consider it like a book, and you can go on there and get information. So it's like an online library. So those are some examples of large databases that would assist the public. So if you guys don't have those answers, you can take those down. Um, Great. So question number three. Anissa is opening a small cake business. Explain whether a word processor, database, or spreadsheet would be suitable for each of the following scenario. So we have three scenario, and one of these software is going to go each of the scenario that we have there. So for scenario, What software would be suitable for scenario A? She first needs to store the names and contact information of her customers, types of cakes ordered, and the occasion. Shermany says spreadsheet for A. Anyone else?
Database.
Somebody says database. Anyone else?
Database, sir.
Database. Alright, so we're going to keep database here. And we can come back to that. B. She then wants to store the money she receives weekly from cake sales so that every 3 months she can analyze her profits using a graphic
So spreadsheet.
spreadsheet. So I'm seeing some persons. Rizwan says spreadsheet also. Anyone else? You can type your answers in the chat also if you don't want to unmute for anyone to hear you. So we have spreadsheet here. And then the last one, Anissa wants to keep track of the quantities of items used to ensure she has sufficient ingredients available in storage. So I guess word processing would be here. So
Yes.
the how could we differentiate? How can we confirm that this is the correct order? Database, spreadsheet, and Word. Well, we have to remember what's the difference between a database and a spreadsheet. Anybody remember the difference?
Sir, I think is that spreadsheet is generally for calculating info, and database is just storing data.
Very good. That is the difference. Your spreadsheet is mainly used for calculation, and database is mainly used to storing large amounts of data. So anytime you're seeing calculations, that should already click in your mind. You're dealing with something with that has to use spreadsheet. So you're seeing here they mentioning the amount of money, the amount of sales, and they want to analyze those values to get graphic, which would mean charts and so on. That there should already put in your mind that it's a spreadsheet. Now, for A, it mentions storing names, contact information with customers, types of cakes ordered, the occasion. That's already um, four categories of data. So yes, even though you could actually store all of this in spreadsheet, you can store all of this in even Microsoft Word. Remember, a database is more suitable for storing data, for storing text data. It's more suitable for that. So A, the correct answer is going to be database. B, the correct answer is going to be spreadsheet. Now, why would C just be a simple word processor? Well, Anissa wants to keep track of the quantities of items used to ensure she has sufficient ingredients available in storage. So it's just a simple table she's creating. She has ingredients on one side and she has how much in the other side. So if she has eggs, she might just have like 10 eggs remaining. Flour, how much flour does she has remaining? 2 pounds of flour. So it doesn't really require for you to build an entire database just to keep track of ingredients. And even still, you can do it inside of spreadsheet, but it's just a simple table that is created. So a simple word processor, or even um, a text editor, like for example Notepad, that could have been suitable also because it's just managing that there. But processor would be more suitable because in the word processor you can actually create a table. In a notepad program you won't be able to create tables and organize your data. So those are the correct answers there. Congratulations to those persons that got the correct answers. For those who didn't, please ensure you note the correct answers there. Any questions before we move on to this homework? One thing to note is that whenever we're going through something, and if you guys want to ask me a question, feel free. You can stop me at any time. As some of you might feel as though you don't want to interrupt me. I don't mind. So if you have a question during while I'm explaining something and you want to clarify it right there and then, you can feel free to indicate that question. All right. Um, so we're moving on to chapter 8.2. So, sir, can a normal library be considered a large database? Yes, a normal library can. Remember, um, the question doesn't ask whether the database for question two. The question doesn't ask whether the database is computerized or manual. It's just asking for a large database. So anything that is large and stored a lot of data is a large database. So physical library, yes, that is a large database also. Um, all libraries are large. Not all libraries are large because you guys have a library at home. I'm sure you guys have books at home, and that's a small library, right? All them. Anybody got mangoes at home? I'm sure you guys don't buy a lot. Yeah. So common database management features. That's what we're going to be starting with today. So what we covered in 8.1 is basically an understanding as to what is a database. That's what we covered so far. So it's a general understanding about database. What is it? What are the types? What are the advantages? What are the disadvantages? And so on. Excuse me. So now what we're going to get into is basically trying to understand actually using a database software. What are some of the features? What are some of the tools? What are some of the options that you have in this database software? Everything that we're going to go through 8.1. Yeah. Hold on. I think my computer's going to overheat anytime now. Yes. So, um, so if for those of you who don't have Microsoft Access, I advise you to try to get it as soon as possible because this is a software that you'll be using to practice how to use your database. There's no online version like how for Google there was Google Docs, Sheet, Slides, and Form. There is no online version of that. There is Open Office, Apache Open Office, and it's free because it's open source. And Xiaomi has a Chromebook. Well, Chromebook is basically running it's like if you're running a phone. So you won't be able to get either. Um, yeah, but this software here, but I would still advise you, even if you download this software here, open Office, and you can use it to practice in the meantime. I'm looking for the list of product. Yeah. So when you download it, you're gonna get all of these applications here, and Base is the application. It's just like Microsoft. When you download Microsoft, you get Access, you get Word, you get Excel, you get PowerPoint, and all of those applications in one. It's the same with OpenOffice. You get all of these applications in one. And Base is basically their version of a database, but you can use it to practice if you don't get access. But I would still recommend you still try to get access so that you can practice with this one here. Because remember, access is what companies are going to use, businesses are going to use, and so on. So you want to practice with what is basically the standard that business and organizations are going to use today. So when you leave school, you have a familiarity with software that those companies are going to be using. Now, what was I talking about? Yeah, that's how you can get practice on that. So if you don't have a computer, or if you have a Chromebook, please team up with somebody that has a computer, a Windows-based computer. Even if you have a MacBook, I'm very sorry to say that even if you have a MacBook, you cannot get access on your MacBook because Microsoft has not developed a database software for MacBooks. So you're out there also. So the only way to run a database software is basically to get a Windows-based computer. So those who have a MacBook, those who have a Chromebook, those who have no computer, please try to pair up with somebody that has a Windows-based computer, somebody that has access to basically that has access to access. Yes, education is expensive. All right, so we're getting into chapter 8.2, common database management features. So let's see. All right, Jada, can you start the reading for us?
Let us first examine what makes up a database. a database. The main purpose of a database is to store data. It stores this data in a number of related files, more commonly called tables. A table consists of a collection of records. A record consists of a number of fields. A field is the smallest piece of data that can be stored.
Great. So, have you guys heard of any of these terms when Sir Skeet was teaching you guys? Have you guys heard of table, record, field, and so on?
Yes, sir.
All right, great. So, we're going to go into detail as to what they are. So, as mentioned already, the main purpose of a database is to store data, to store it in an organized manner. Um, Data is stored in a number of related files, more commonly called tables. So, if you notice in this diagram here, this diagram represents basically the layout as to how data is stored in a database. So firstly, you're going to create a database. And then secondly, inside of this database, you are going to create tables inside of this database. Now, if you notice, each table is about a specific topic. We We can learn about this later on. But a table is actually only supposed to store data on a specific topic or a specific subject. So, for example, this table here is only about customers. This table here is only about products. This table is only about orders. So, you cannot put everything into one table. So, if you had created one table with everything inside, like this here, and you name it, you name that one table bookshop, that would be incorrect. Your database would not be able to function properly. So, to effectively create your database, you must separate data into its own table based on a certain topic. So, for example, um, um, for those who know about cars, alright, we can come back to that because there's an entire section that talks about tables, I think. Yeah, we can come back to that when we're talking about that section. But that's the main idea there, that each table has its own topic. Now, inside of the table, cars or cards, I was cars without a D. We can come back to it, that's no. Um, Inside of the table now, you're going to enter your data. You're going to type in your data. Now, a row inside of that table is called a record. So as you enter data in your table, so imagine your table like an actual table. Like if you're creating a table in Microsoft Word, or you guys are drawing a table, it's very similar. It's exactly the same. So you create a table, you put name. This might be first name. This might be last name, and you're gonna put in information. Now, information in this row, is it gonna be related to each other or not related?
Related to each other.
Related. So, because this first name here is going to relate to this last name, is going to relate to this age, and everything else in the row. So, information in a row is related to each other. And it's similar to what is happening inside of your database table. Information in a row is related to each other. So, for example, 1122 John Rich is all related to each other. The first name is Rich, the last name is John, and 1122 is his CID. They're all related. So information that is related to each other, that is in the same row, is called a record. So it is a record of that data there. And then lastly, we have a field. So inside of the record now, one piece of data in that record is called a field. So any single piece of data, any single piece is considered a field. One piece of data is called a field. So as the paragraph mentions at the top here, a table consists of a collection of records. Record consists of a number of fields. Excuse me. And a field is the smallest piece of data that you can store. So this is the order that you create a database basically. You create the database, number one. You create tables. You enter data. And well, basically, you're going to enter data and it's going to go in individually as the fields, but then they're going to combine into a record. Are you guys clear on that?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right, great. So let's continue there. So, we come up to that just now. Let me not give you too much information one time. So, let's see. Jasmine Primo, can you read for us the next paragraph? Mic not working. All right, the next Jasmine.
Figure 8.2 shows a database about a bookshop. There may be other tables, but three are shown in the database relating to the bookshop. One of the tables is called order. Each table is made up of rows of records. Each table has columns with field names that describe the type of information that is stored in each field. In figure 8.3, the order table has three columns with field names CID, PRID, and QTY, and seven rows of records. Each record therefore has three fields of data. The record in the fourth row of the order table suggests that the customer with ID 1138 Ed Yod ordered 100 units of the product with ID P3745 receipt book. The power of a database is that information contained in fields can be searched, grouped, sorted, and or exported, often in a matter of seconds. In Microsoft Access, you create a database by giving it a suitable name before you create the tables to enter the data. Table 8.2 illustrates the various components of a database.
Great. So we have an example of a database here. So figure 8.3, the data in the order table links to the data in order tables. All right, so just for now, know that we have an example of a database here. We have three tables of data. So let's go through back the paragraph. Figure 8.2. Okay, so it's the same thing at the top here. It shows the database. Figure 8.2 shows the database about the bookshop. There may be other tables, but we're only seeing three tables. Now, one of the tables is called order, and each table is made up of rows of records. Remember we mentioned that? A row is called a record. Each table has columns with field names that describe the type of information that is stored. So the column is going to have what we call a field name. And you can also think of this field name as a column heading. So just like how if you would create a table, if you're drawing up a table, you would put headings at the top of your table, first name, last name, age. Those are also called field names in your database. So, for example, in the customer table, what would be the field names? That's a question to you guys. Let me see if you understand what I just said. In the customer table, what is the field names? Remember, field name refers to the heading.
CID last and first.
Very good. So field name refers to the heading of the table. You gotta imagine it like if it's a table. Like that. CID last and first. So for the product table, what would be the field names?
PR
Search.
ID, description, cost.
Very good. And the order table, what is the field names?
CID, PR ID, QTY.
Very good. So I hope everyone understands that. Field name basically refers to the column heading's title. And that field name or that column heading basically describes what data is in that column. So for example, first is describing the first name of that customer. Last is describing the last name of that customer. CID is describing the CID of that customer. Are you guys clear on that?
Yes, sir.
But so the table has three columns: CID, PRID, and QTY, 7 rows of records. Each record therefore has 3 fields of data. Because if you notice, it's 3 pieces of data, so it's 3 fields of data in each record. The record in the 4th row suggests that the customer with that is related to that and so on. So remember I mentioned whatever is in line in that row is related to each other. So for example, this record here indicates that 1167 is the CID for wall an or an wall. Now the power of database is that information contained can be searched. So what can we do with the database? We can search for data that we enter. We can group the data that we enter. So we can change it up. We can rearrange it and group it in different ways. We can sort the data that we would have entered, or we can export the data to another program or to another person so that they can maybe examine the data. So you enter the data into a database, and what are you going to do next? You can search for specific data, group it in different ways to analyze it, sort it in different ways to further analyze it, and export it to other programs, and so on. Now, it mentions here that in Microsoft Access, you create a database by giving it a suitable name before you create the tables in to enter the data. So let me close that. So if we go back to our diagram here, remember it says here that you basically have to create a database and then you create a table. So how can you create a database when the database is supposed to have data inside of it? Well, this represents a software database. So you can actually create a database with software without there actually being data inside of it. So when we go to Access, and this page here comes up, this section, and it asks us to click on this blank database, and we click on it. And what it's asking us to do here now is to enter a name for a database. And notice what it says here, create. So we are actually creating a database here. We have just created a database. There's no data inside of it, but we've accomplished this first part here. We have created a database. There's no table inside of it, there's no record, there's no field. We have simply created a database here. So it's actually that simple to create a database using software. But obviously, a database is nothing without its data. So obviously we have to enter data into our database there. So once again, this simple file that we created, so if I go to documents, these simple files here, where are they? These simple files here, database 1, database 2, database 3, database 4. All of these files here, they are all database, even though they might not have data inside of them. So, what are some additional terms you need to understand for a database, especially how we're going to continue to use Microsoft Access? These are some terms that you should take note of. So, I'm going to be using the word object a lot. So, the question now is, what is an object? So, an object refers to components that make up a database. So, what are some components that make up a database? Tables, forms, queries, reports, macros, and modules. Those all combine to make a database. What is a database? A database can consist of multiple tables. So what is a table now? So we just learned that a table is referred to as an object in a database. So what is a table? A table is a collection of records about a specific topic, such as students or vehicles. So remember I mentioned that earlier? A table must be about a specific topic. So for example, we have we can do a specific topic about students or vehicles. Let me create new. So imagine this is your table here. Now, this is one table. So what are some types of vehicles? We have cars. What else?
Sir, trucks.
Trucks. Anything else? What any cars and trucks y'all know? Vans.
Vans,
Um,
motorcycles.
motorcycle, and so on. So that's what your table is going to be about. If your table is about types of vehicles, then this is what your table might look like. Now, if your focus is about types of cars, your table is not going to look like that. Types of cars, your table is not going to look like that. Your table, what are some types of cars?
Lamborghini.
Sir, and it's
Range Rover.
Well, those are going to be models. Those aren't going to be type art. So I guess that would be a better category because you guys are going to understand that more. As I was looking more at sedan and those. So we have Lamborghini, Toyota, Mercedes, BMW,
Honda.
Honda, Honda. Good. Are you guys getting the idea?
Yes, sir.
Great. So whenever you're creating a table, the table must be about a specific topic, and that topic only. So what is another type of object in your database? A query. So what is a query? A query is basically you asking specific questions about the data in the database. So you're asking questions. Who are you asking this question to? Who are you directing this question towards? Your database. So your database already has the data inside of it, and you're going to ask it some questions. For example, you might ask it, how many students got over 80% overall? How many students got less than 50% overall? Those are some questions you can ask the database, and it would return those results back to you. What is another object in your database? A form. What is a form? It is a graphical user interface designed specifically for entering, displaying, and searching data. It's an alternative to entering data in the spreadsheet like view. So it's an alternative to entering data. And then lastly, we have a report, another object, which is used to summarize and format data either from either a table or query data. So those are the objects that we're going to be looking at. Those are some objects that we are going to be looking at. Um, so whenever I say where are your objects, I'm basically referring to where are your tables, where are your forms, where are your queries, where are your reports, and so on. We're not going to look into macros and modules. Table, forms, queries, and reports are what we are going to focus on. So just note that an object is something that you create in Microsoft Access. So if we go to Microsoft Access, notice we have a Create tab at the top here. So under this Create tab, if you notice, we have the Tables section, we have the Queries section, we have the Forms section, we have the Reports section. Very good question, Shermany. What are macros and modules? Honestly, I have no answer to that question yet. I've never actually looked into it, but I think it's a more let me not come up with anything to tell you. I'm going to look into it, and maybe next class I will give you an answer as to what is macros and modules. But we're going to only focus on tables, queries, forms, and reports. Macros and modules are actually a more advanced way of using database. It's a bit more technical, so that's why we actually don't use them. But obviously, it can be simple to use once you understand them. But you guys only need to learn the basics of database. Um, Great. So those are the four objects we are going to focus on: tables, forms, queries, and reports. One thing to note, actually, I think, yeah, there's an entire more description about each one of them. Tables. It only talks about tables. Alright, so when we come back to tables there, we're going to talk more about that. So let's get into creating a table. Why do we need to create a table? And a table is actually one of the first things, or one of the second things we're going to create after creating that database. So remember when we open Access, we created a blank database. So that's the first thing we created. The second thing that you're always going to create is tables, because tables are where you are going to store your data. So even though we have all of these objects here, we have queries, we have forms, we have reports, they do not store data. Please remember that they do not store data. Your data is mainly located in tables. So you always have to create tables first before you can enter your data. You actually cannot create any query, form, or report. Actually, you can. You can create a query and a form and a report. but there won't be any data inside of it because you don't have any tables. So a table must always be created first. So let's get into that paragraph there. Jakia, can you read for us? Are you reading? Because we're not hearing anything. Your mic is on. Alright, seems she's having problems. Jonathan, could you help her out?
Creating a table. Before you create the database and its tables, you must first choose an appropriate name for the database that describes its purpose. Then provide suitable names for the tables based on the types of records that will be stored in them. For each table in the database, you should consider the following components: field name, which identifies the data stored in a field; field type, also called data type, which tells the database program what kind of data goes in the field, such as text, number, or date; field length, which determines the size of each field in the table; field description to allow you to describe the purpose of the field; field properties, which include checks that the data is valid.
Very good. So, we have to create a table. Now, if you notice, they're actually mentioning this a lot. Use an appropriate name, use a suitable name. This is something you have to become familiar with throughout IT. Whether you're doing spreadsheet, whether you're doing database, and later on when you guys are going to start programming, when you're doing the web page, you must use appropriate names. What do we mean by appropriate name? What do we mean by a suitable name? The name must represent what you are doing. The name must represent what is stored. What you're using basically must represent it. So if you're talking about cars, um, the title should be cars. The title shouldn't be vehicles. Um, if you're talking about numbers, it should be what type of numbers specifically are you talking about? Are you talking about whole numbers? Are you talking about positive numbers? Are you talking about negative numbers? You must be specific with anything you are given a name in IT. So please take note of that. Now, creating a table in your um, database. Good. So when we create a table, the table should have a name based on the type of records that are going to be stored inside of it. So we looked at the example of created this table for car models. So the table should have a name, car models or models of cars. It shouldn't be models of vehicles because that there would be a little vague. What vehicles are you talking about? So your title must always be appropriate, must always be suitable. So how do we create a table in our database? So I'm going to delete this one here. So if you notice, whenever you open a database, a table is always automatically started up for you because that's where you're going to enter your data inside of a table. So I'm actually going to delete this here. Um, Gotta close it so that it disappears. Good. So we have nothing there. How do we create a table? Well, you have to go to the Create tab and then you select Table. So out of these three options, this is actually the only one that we're going to use. Table. And this here is basically your table. It was just created. Now we have components of your table. Where will we locate these components? Well, let's go back to our database. If you notice, you have view over here. So we need to click on this view and go to design view. And notice it's already telling us to give it a name. So we're gonna give it that name of grade 10 S/T. Okay, so that there is my table. Now there is also an option here of table design, and I think when you create this one here, if you notice, it automatically goes to the same area. So that's the only difference there, where it basically takes you after you would have created your table. So if you notice, the view, there's two views. One is a datasheet view, where you can basically see data as the name implies, and then there's a design view. So these two here, this one basically on the left, table, that one is just gonna create a table and it's gonna put you on the datasheet view. Whereas table design is gonna create a table and put you into the design view. They're basically doing the same thing, but just putting you into different views. So it doesn't really matter which one you use. So that is basically how you create a table. You go to create and you choose either one. Now, where are these components? Field name, field type, field length, field description, and field properties. So the first component, field name. What is a field name? Field name identifies the data stored in a field. So remember we talked about that earlier. Field name refers to the heading of the column. We talked about that here. A field name refers to the heading of that column. It identifies what is stored in that field, what type of data is being stored in that field. So let's go to home, because it's either home or table fields where you're gonna find this view option. If you notice, when I go to create, I don't see it. External data, I don't see it either. So you gotta go to home or this table view, table fields, in order to be able to switch over to design. So we want to be on design view in order to see field name. So those at the top here, we have field name. So here we are going to design our table. So that's actually what you need to do. So if you actually list the order of creating a database, it would be something like this here. So you guys can take this down also. Steps to create a database. So the first step is going to be create a database. Remember, create a database means to create that database file. Then anybody wants to make a guess what comes after this here, after you create the database? We mentioned it already.
Create a table.
Very good. You gotta create a table. Create tables. So how much ever tables you need to create those tables in order to store your data. Now, you create your tables, you actually need to design your tables next. And that's basically what we're going to do now. Design our tables. So you create the database, you create your tables, and you would need to design your tables. How do you design your tables? You design your tables by using the components of the table. The components include the field name, the field type, the field length, description, properties, and these are only a few of them. So designing a table basically means to um, choose different field names, field types, setting the field length, and so on. So how do we do that? So on the field name, notice it's a column now, and we're supposed to create our field names. So I could say first underscore name. So that's one field name there. And if you notice, we have data type over here. The second column, that is the same as field type. Data type and field type are the same. Notice it mentions it here, also called data type. What does this do? It tells the database program what kind of data goes into that field. Whether text is going to that field, whether numbers is going to go in, whether dates are going to go into that field. Um, was there anything similar in spreadsheet like that? In spreadsheet, was there anything similar like that? Anybody remember this format area here, whereby you could change how the data is represented, how the data is formatted? So that there is similar to choosing your data type in your database, where you can set what type of data it is going to be, whether it's time, whether if it's a percentage, whether if it's a currency, whether it's text, whatever the case may be. So setting the type or changing the format in spreadsheet is equivalent to setting your data type in database. So you're indicating what type of data is going to go into that field. Now, name. What type of data are you going to expect inside of this name field? What type of data is name? Is someone's name? Is the question that hard?
Sure.
Text. So short text, long text, but the fact is that it's going to be text, right? And we're going to learn later on what's the difference between these two type of text. But just note for now that first name, obviously, it refers to text. So if we put in phone, I think by default, let's see, what's, hold on. I think by default it's just giving text all the time. So if you notice, we can change it to number, we can change it to date and time, we can change it to currency, whatever the case may be. Um, Great. So field name refers to the name of that column that you're going to create inside of your table. So notice, remember we're inside of the design view. So if you go over to your data sheet, we're going to save first, yes. So if you notice, we have our column headings here that I just created. First name, phone, and cell. Let me fix that. So this should be last underscore name. Age. Number, good. So change view, save, yes. So now just we have our headings here. First name, last name. So now I can enter some things. Enter some data. And we are adding data there to our table. Next, we have field length. So, what is field length? Field length determines the size of the field, the size of the data that will be represent that field. So, let's see. Go back to datasheet view. Short text. If you notice here, we have at the very bottom. Look at the bottom here. You have field size, and if you notice, it has a number 255. So 255 means that this field can hold 255 characters. So let me actually so that's four characters there. So if I change this to 10, or I'm gonna change it to 5 actually. I'm setting the field size for first name to 5 characters. I'm gonna save and I'm gonna change my view, and notice what happens if I try to enter more than 5 characters. I'm actually pressing keys on my keyboard. Notice I'm deleting, and I'm entering more, I'm deleting, and I'm entering more. But I cannot go beyond that 5 characters. That there is the field size. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I cannot type 6 because I set the field size to 5 characters. So only 5 characters can be entered into this field here. So that is field length, which is also called field size. Then we also have field description. Field description basically describes what the field is about. So go back to your design view. Notice we have description over here. So we can type in something here. So this here, it doesn't show up anywhere except inside of this design view. So you can say first name of students of St. Stanislaus College. So you can give more guidance as to what the field is about. That's the purpose of that description there. And then lastly, you have this field properties area. This field properties, if you notice at the bottom here, you have field properties. Think of the field properties as different settings for each field name. The field properties are for individual field names. Because if you notice, when I click on first name, I have 5 at the bottom here. But if I click on last name, I have 255. So they're not linked together. Each field name has its own set of field properties. So for first name, I could say it is only 5 characters, and last name, I can say that should be 10 characters. So that there is the location of all of these components. This column here is where you set your field names, which are basically your column headings. The second column is where you specify what is the type of data. The third column is where you write a small description as to what the field name is about. At the bottom, you have your field properties, which is unique for each field. Because even when you notice I click on age, the field properties change based on that. It actually changes based on the data type. Because each data type also has a different amount of options or field properties. And then we looked at field size or field length. That sets how much data can be entered. So, in review of what we looked at today, today we looked at what are some. We're gonna continue this table, these steps later on, as we add more to it. And so, we looked at what is a database. We looked at what is a table. We looked at what is a record, and we looked at what is a field. And then we looked at what are some terms and definitions you need to know about in database. What is an object, a table, a query, a form and a report, and then we looked at some steps for creating a table. The next part goes into description about each one of those components. Alright, is there any questions before we end? No questions? Alright, if you guys don't have any questions, that is the end of today's class. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too, sir. Bye bye.
Goodbye.